On Monday, I did a video about who the worst team in college football is. We went through each and every conference and talked about the worst teams, the different candidates, and ultimately we picked a worst team for each conference and overall. Kent State ended up taking the cake, and for the second straight year, the Golden Flashes are the worst team in college football. They've been getting humiliated pretty much each and every week now. In their program's history, they're terrible, and they are not showing much promise for the future. I was asking myself the question, why is that? Why is Kent State notoriously so bad at football each and every year? Well, today we're going to examine that question. We're going to go through the history of Kent State football, talk about how bad they've been, some of the things that have been holding them back, and also why there is still a little glimmer of hope at the end of the horizon. I mean, they did have a couple of good seasons under Sean Lewis, so it's not like it's impossible to win in Kent State. But before we get started with the video, be sure to take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about why Kent State football is always so terrible. After their first few attempts to create a college football program failed because they lost to local high schools and the student athletes got discouraged about how bad the program was. When they did start a competitive football team in 1920, they didn't win their first true road game until 5 years later in 1925, with their only victories beforehand coming because of forfeits. They didn't even score in their first 14 games, going 0-13-1. They had multiple games where they were blown out entirely, like a 118-0 loss to Baldwin College. Over time though, as Kent State University grew, they were able to improve their college football program. The football team was revived after being dormant because of World War II, and they were under head coach Trevor Reese for 18 seasons, and he would go 93, 63, and 5, which was their longest stretch of success in school history. They would join the MAC Conference in 1951, and their best year was in 1954, where the Golden Flashes went 8-2 and went to their first ever bowl game, the Refrigerator Bowl. They lost that game 19-7 to Delaware. Back then, Kent State was a part of the NCAA's small college football division, which would eventually become the FCS. Coach Reese retired in 1963, having brought Kent State to at least some form of respectability as a program, especially in the state of Ohio, which was full of small colleges that were playing football at the time. But the Golden Flashes were in a cold streak at the time of his retirement, so they brought in Leo Strange from a local powerhouse, Massillon Washington High School. Kent State would ultimately regress. They went 16-21-2 in 4 seasons under Strange, and they only got worse from there. They went 9-21 under Dave Puddington, and then moved into their current stadium, Dick Stadium, in 1970. This was the same year as the Kent State Massacre, which rocked the entire university so badly that the football team considered not playing. But in 1971, Kent State started to look on the up after hiring Don James. He brought in players like Jack Lambert, Gary Pinkel, and Nick Saban to play for the Golden Flashes. In 1972, he was also able to bring Kent State to their only MAC Conference championship in football so far, going 6-5-1, and then losing to the University of Tampa in the Tangerine Bowl. The very next season, Kent State would go 9-2, but couldn't win the MAC and didn't go to a bowl game. His last season in 1974, he took Kent State to a 7-4 record, but again couldn't win the MAC, and because of it, couldn't bring the Golden Flashes to another bowl game. Following the 1974 season, Coach James would accept the head coaching job at Washington, and Kent State would once again go back to being abysmal. From 1975 to 1987, the Golden Flashes only had 3 winning seasons, 2 under Dennis Fitzgerald in 1976 and 1977, and 1 under Glenn Mason in 1987. From 1988 to 2000, the Golden Flashes didn't have a single season where they won more than 5 games, and this was really sad. From 2000 to 2011, Kent State's record was 49-91, and they also didn't make a single bowl game. But that changed with the hiring of Darrell Hazell in 2011. He went 5-7 in 2011 and brought Kent State to their best season in school history in 2012. He led them to an 11-3 record, with losses in the MAC championship game to Northern Illinois and then in the GoDaddy Bowl to Arkansas State. This was the team's first double-digit winning season in history, and their only loss in the regular season was to Kentucky. They had one of the best running games in the country, mostly because of one guy, Dree Archer. He's one of the fastest players in college football history, who accounted for 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns and averaged 9 yards per carry, and also caught 561 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. But he was technically their backup. Their starter was Trayon Durham, and he had 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns on the ground. But Coach Hazell would not stay and help build the Golden Flashes even further, as he eventually went on to coach at Purdue and was a huge disaster for the Boilermakers and set them back years before Jeff Brom had to clean up the mess. Over the next 5 years under head coach Paul Haynes, Kent State would struggle to a 14-45 record and hit the reset button once again in 2018, but this time they'd actually find a good coach in Sean Lewis. After going 2-10 in 2018, Lewis brought the Golden Flashes to their first ever bowl win in 2019 on the back of a 6-6 season. They go 3-1 in the pandemic season in 2020, and then 7-5 in 2021, making but losing the MAC championship game to Northern Illinois, and they also would lose in the Idaho Potato Bowl. But this was the most successful 3-year stretch in Kent State history. He'd lead the Golden Flashes to a 5-7 rebuilding year in 2022, but then answered the call to be Colorado's offensive coordinator under Coach Prime in 2023. There were some pretty decent Kent State players. Colin Schlee was a really good quarterback who ended up at UCLA and is now at Virginia Tech. You had receivers Dante Cephas and Devontae Walker, who Cephas is currently at K-State, and Walker was a star at North Carolina before becoming a Baltimore Raven this fall. So now we get to the Kenny Burns era. Without Lewis at head coach, Kent State would now have to rely upon former Minnesota running backs coach Kenny Burns, who led them to a 1-11 record in 2023 with no wins in the MAC and so far an 0-4 record in 2024. They've gotten blown out by just about every team they've played, including a loss to FCS St. Francis, Pennsylvania. That is absolutely terrible. Coach Burns had never had a big-time coaching job until his time at Kent State, and it honestly felt like a hire the Golden Flashes made because either they didn't have the money to hire an established coach from the FCS or Group of 5, or because they were hoping to hire a gem. He'd spent 2017 to 2022 with Minnesota as their running backs coach and was with Coach PJ Fleck at Western Michigan, coaching running backs in 2016 as well. Guys like Mo Ibrahim, Trey Potts, Bryce Williams, and most recently Bucky Irving all played for Minnesota, so he could seemingly do a decent job with that. He also had guys like Rod Smith, who put up over 4,000 yards and 29 rushing touchdowns, and then obviously Mo Ibrahim, who at one point was a low-key Heisman contender and finished his career with 4,600 yards and 53 touchdowns. Coach Burns gets a lot of credit for the development of all those big-time running backs, but he has not proven to be a good program builder during his time at Kent State, and honestly I think it's because he hasn't had any experience in building a program or building players up. PJ Fleck was a pretty good coach at Western Michigan, but hasn't really elevated the Minnesota program at all since he replaced Jerry Kill. They've been about the same. On top of that, he hasn't improved recruiting for the Golden Flashes either. Their 2023 class finished 127th overall with exactly 5 3-star recruits, none of which have seen considerable playing time yet, and his 2024 class finished ranked 115th in the nation. He's not all that good at building an offense either. Given he was a running backs coach though, you'd expect that Kent State's running game would be pretty good. But in 2023, their leading rusher, Gavin Garcia, ran for just 544 yards and 2 touchdowns. The other running backs in the system, Jalen Thomas, ended up running for 460 yards and 2 scores, and their best offensive player from scrimmage was Cre'Shawn McCray, who had 610 yards and 4 scores. They ended up having 2 different starting quarterbacks as well, as they had former Purdue guy Michael Alamo, who threw for 932 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then Tommy Ulatowski, who threw for 737 yards and 7 touchdowns. Devin Cargman is the quarterback, and the Flashes are somehow even worse. They dropped their first game to Pittsburgh 55-24, and then followed it up with a loss to FCS level St. Francis, Pennsylvania. Last year, in a very low level of football, St. Francis, PA finished the year with a record of 4-6. So far, their win over Kent State is their only one on the season, and my goodness, that is the worst loss of any FBS team. After the loss to FSA, Kent State has since then been shut out by both number 7 Tennessee and number 10 Penn State on the road. Honestly, can you really blame them though, as Tennessee's offense is absolutely insane, and Penn State's offense is also getting a lot better. Still though, Kent State is not showing any sort of promise or potential, and they're not even able to score any points, sadly. So why is Kent State so bad? You've probably thought about it. You saw them give up 71 unanswered points to Tennessee, and 56 unanswered to Penn State. Why are they so bad when teams like Northern Illinois, Eastern Michigan, or Toledo can occasionally upset Power 5 teams? Well, there are a handful of reasons for that, and most of them have to do with the situation surrounding the university itself. For one, Kent State, its nearby rival Akron is just a couple of miles away, and it isn't in a great part of the state. Kent, Ohio is technically a suburb of Cleveland, and it was historically a manufacturing town. While Akron was huge on making and distributing rubber, Kent was more of a basic distribution center, using railroads to kick out grain and other products to the rest of the country. Where am I going with this? Well, when the industry died, Kent as a city itself died, making Kent State their largest economic asset, even still today. No attempts were made to redevelop the city around Kent State until around 2008, so for a long time, not only was Kent State located in a dying town in the shadow of another MAC member, but it was also terrible at football at the same exact time. Akron's all-time football record is 525, 595, and 36, so that's good for a 47% win percentage. Kent State is 324, 505, and 28, which is good for just over 39%. It's hard to build a program when you're historically terrible, and the team that is literally 30 minutes away from you in the same conference is just a little bit better than you are. Even in the talent-rich state of Ohio, Kent State is one of 6 members in the state of Ohio in the MAC conference, meaning they're already competing with 5 other schools in their conference alone for recruits. Even with former flashes like Julian Edelman and James Harrison being NFL legends for the better part of the 2000s and 2010s, Kent State doesn't really have anyone else to point to other than Lou Holtz and Nick Saban as former big-time players. They can also claim Gary Pinkel as a coach as well. That all circles around to the main problem. Kent State is not a signature job. It never was a signature job. But where other MAC schools like Toledo might be able to keep a good coach like Jason Candle for a long time, Kent State has not been able to keep a good coach once they've had a good season. Darrell Hazel left for the Big Ten the first chance he got, and even when he was fired from Purdue in 2016 after going 9-33, he didn't bother to come back to Kent State. Sean Lewis might legitimately have been the best coach Kent State has ever had in their history, leading them to a MAC championship appearance and 2 bowl game appearances. But even he left for a coordinator job at a Power 5 level the second it was offered to him. Now he's the head man at San Diego State. Kent State just can't keep successful coaches around, whether that's because of the lack of money in their athletic department, or just a bad stadium, or because it's one of the hardest coaching jobs in the country and no one wants to be there. I honestly don't know if Kent State will ever turn it around because of that. Unless they have a head coach come through who wants to stick and build the program into something it hasn't been before, they're going to be stuck in this same cycle because of their poor location, bad facilities, and the constant coaching movement. Kenny Burns has proven he's probably not the answer at head coach, and I don't even know who they go after if they fired him. My first call would be to Vince Keys, Toledo's defensive coordinator, because not only has he proven to be a solid DC, but his dad is a member of the Hall of Fame due to his coaching at Division III Mount Union. They're going to need someone like a Lance Leipold, someone who wants to come and win at Kent State, who falls in love with the area, and plans to establish roots. He'll have to build through the JUCO world, will have to build through the offensive and defensive lines, and will somehow someway have to convince a couple of hidden gems to also come to Kent, Ohio. It's not exactly the greatest sell in the world going to that campus, but with the right coach and maybe a little bit of money and investment, Kent State could actually be decent. I really doubt it, but they did show for a couple of years that the Golden Flashes could have a flash at success. Only time will tell, but I feel bad for the Kent State program, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to let me know with a like and a comment, and also let me know what other program or topic I should cover next. I want to do more videos like this, so be sure to leave a comment, and before you go, don't forget to also check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about who is the worst team in college football. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.